Let's piece a quilt together. Today we're going to be sewing together blocks that we have already made to create a king-size quilt. So here are all of our blocks that we have. We are going to go ahead and piece them out into rows, and let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to Where Wendy Creates.
Okay, so we just keep on sewing our blocks together, making our seams sure we're lining up and our seams are laying the right way. Here we're going the same direction. This is where a stiletto comes in real nice, so my fingers wouldn't be in your way. Back stitch at the end. All right. And now our next two blocks are going to be a solid and a red again. And so we're going to go ahead and do the mariachis. And a red brick. And we're putting the one on top that has the seams we've got to follow, because that's easier. The bottom is just straight. And I got slightly off my quarter seam, so I'm going to go back and do that little section again, because it is important at this point to make sure we're keeping that solid same seam. And although it was like 1/32, it's important to keep that same seam, so we want to continue to do that. And our blocks are looking great, I think. Again, we've got our solids going through with our other piecing and looking very well. All right. Okay, red, and now according to the pattern, I need green. So we're going to go ahead and put this on, and then we're going to turn it, match up the seams. Should stick a couple of pins in it in this step. And then we are going to make sure our seams are laying properly. They're right at the edge, going together. See how I have that? And that's how we want to line up each and every seam. So, and it looks like some of them are just a 1/16 off, which makes a bulk. So we've got to work that into the picture. And this is perfect up top, so I don't want to change that. We're going to see how the third one lines up. We'll give that a little stretch. The inside seam's going up, bottom one's going down, so that's perfect. And that actually lines those up a little bit better. So now we would stick some needles right in the seams here and here and here before we sew for a perfect match. And we pull out our needles before we get to each of the seams. And we readjust. Looks like I should have left that needle in a little bit longer. Bottom one going down, top going up, perfectly aligned, and that one still looks perfect. Okay. Always checking and rechecking to make sure our seams are laying properly. Okay, and we're going to follow our pattern. And once again, we had a green solid, and now we're going to do the final, the green pinwheel star, and now we're going to do the full solid square. So we have already used the peppers in this row. So let's go ahead and have one of these Mexican blocks we're going to use. Pull our threads out, trim our threads. Now we do have a trimmer on the side of the machine that I can use, but again, scissors are handy, so you do what works for you best. And we're going to flip that block over and have this, make sure we do it right sides up. We're going to turn it around, put it with our square, and now the square solid is on top because we have a lot of bulk, but we want to turn it over, make sure all of our seams are going the way that they were pressed down to go. And we're going to check each seam as we go. Again, I highly recommend needles. It does take an extra minute or two per block, but it guarantees accuracy. And we like to pin right in the seam of each solid block so that we make sure that they are continuing to lay properly. And a lot of beginner sewists actually, believe it or not, we get going and we're novices. We actually sew backs to fronts and fronts to back instead of having it always face to face. And just remember, if your fabrics are always face to face, your seams are always on the back. So that's important. Okay, so we are done with the first row, and we are going to go ahead and go on to the second row. So this is the first row across on our king size quilt, and we're going to go ahead and start the second row. The next step is bring this back to the iron to press it before we join all of our rows. But I think I'm going to go ahead and start our second row before I press each one individually. So again, always referring to our chart when we've made the pattern ourselves. So we're going to start out with a red chili pepper. And next to that, we're going to do I was wrong. We're going to start out with if I could read my pattern correctly, we're going to start out with a red block because I've got a square in there, and immediately we're going to do a green block. And
the table's just a little bit too small for me to do all of these together, but these do have right sides up, so we want to make sure that we keep the right side up. So we have our red, and we're going to do our green. And again, if we're using pens, we're going to take these seams and we're going to stick a pin in between each of these seams, making sure that they're folded and laying correctly. Again, the more time and effort you spend in pressing these pieces and laying down those sides, the easier it is to bring it over to the sewing machine and get it sewn together. Again, I'm starting from the get-go, so I'm just going to hold on to my tail thread so I don't unravel myself at the beginning. And both of the bottom seams go up, the others two lay perfectly couched together. Pull your pins out about a ½ inch before you get to them or less. Just make sure you're going slow in the process. And you can trim threads between each block, and then make sure at the end, at some point, you're trimming the threads again. Okay, so we have our block up, our block up. Our next block is going... Okay, and the next one we're going to pin on, according to our chart, is going to be a green pinwheel star. So we're going to put it down, line up the seams. Make sure our seams are going the way that we have originally pressed them. And this is where we would stick the pins in them. When you start, hold your threads. I like to back stitch at the top and at the bottom, so I'm locking in that position. And we're going to double check as we go over each seam. Down to our bottom seams. Okay, and after the green pinwheel star is going to be a solid and then a red pinwheel star. So let's go ahead and do our solids. We want to make sure that they line up well. Perfect. A solid and then a red pinwheel star. So let's grab a red pinwheel star out of the package, seams up, line them up. Make sure we're not torquing those seams. That's also very important. They're laying properly. We're not pulling them or tugging them against the bias. And our next two in this same row is going to be a green and then a green. So we have our green pinwheel star, and before it in the column is our green rows. And we want to make sure that we're not overlapping too many of the same piece. So see, in the first row we had this. So in the second row, we don't want to use that piece. We want to jump over and use a different piece. And then in the third row, we can use that one again. And make sure our cheese is directional upright. And our seams actually go right together very well here too. And now Now, as you see, I'm actually sewing 3 different parts of the second row. You can do this if you have no distractions and you're focusing and concentrating on what you're doing. Because now we're going to take the top 2 rows and we're going to put them together, and then we'll add the 3rd row. So we're trimming these 2 apart. And our peppers, double check, you're on the 2nd row. We have our green pinwheel star, and then we have a solid and then a red pinwheel star. So let's put that solid right against the green. The solid is the shorter piece, so it's going to be on top. However, we've got to pay special attention to our seams. And we go up, and we go down. And make sure that they are proper as we go down our column. And our 2 fabrics are face to face, and that they're both going lined up on the edge. And we want to be as true to that quarter seam allowance as we can be. So if we find ourselves going in too much, we want to go ahead and pull those threads and do it again. If we find ourselves not going in enough, re-sew that line to where you do have a true 1/4 inch, because they are going to get a little bit of movement. I like all of my quilts to be used, loved, hugged in, rolled in, washed, thrown back on the bed, and loved. Especially when you're giving your quilt away, you don't know if the family pet is going to be up on the quilt or not. You don't know if it's going to be thrown out there for the sleepovers and hugged and loved and spilled on and everything else. So although we want to take good care of our quilts, you got to realize that this is a family heirloom, but it's also a loving teddy bear. So just like the teddy bear has tea parties, so might your quilt. So always keep that in mind. And then after we have our red block, our red square, we have the green cheese that I'm going to add to that, and then the green pinwheel star. So we can go ahead and add those on. And we just keep on going down the line. We're almost done with our second row. We then have a solid and a red picture to look at, and then our row is finished. Voila! So little by little it gets done, seemingly faster sometimes, seemingly slower sometimes, but just keep at it, enjoy yourself, and remember, this is a work of love, a work of love. Okay, and our next 2 blocks, and again, put the bulk of your fabric up on your table so it's not pulling down on you. And we're going to go ahead and take our blocks and set them on 4 stacks in chairs or table or the couch, in my case, in the couch next to me. And that way it's easier to pull from. Making sure that seam stays up where it needs to stay up. And down where it needs to be. Okay, so we've sewn that row together, and now let's take all of our stacks. We're going to set them off to the side of the table. We're going to get up in between each block and grab them from the couch as we sew, and that way we're fully organized. So we're going to have all of our piles set to the side. We're going to get up, get a little exercise in between each block by grabbing which ones we need off of the couch. And that way we are fully organized, we're not overwhelmed, and our quilt, as it grows, can be comfortable on the side of our table without any pulling, torquing, or anything getting in its way. All right, there, we're finally organized. Voila! All right, let the fun commence. There we go. And I'm so excited. I've got those pieces on. And now we're going to grab these next two in our row and finish off this complete row. So very excited about that. And we're going to refer back to our pattern. And we have our row. We've come up to our green pinwheel star, and now we need a solid, and we've selected the cheese as our solid and the peppers in the red square on the end. So the smaller piece is up, our blocks are face to face, we're lining them up, swishing them even. Then we're going to simply fold them together on the side of the table so they're not in the way. Make sure that our seams are laying the same way we have pressed them. Holding our threads as we start so we don't pull our thread out. Locking in that stitch. And going down the length of our block. Making sure we're all lined up. And our seams are each the way they need to be. And we have another row finished. All right, very excited. So again, this quilt is finally coming together. I am so excited about it. I cannot wait to have the whole top pieced so we can put on the borders for the top, which you've already seen us do if you've been following along. And we are going to go ahead and start on another row. Okay, my friends, and if you will pardon my mess, I'm going to show you how I'm laying it out on the couch. Another couple of rows, we're going to move it all into the king-size bed and lay it out flat. But I did want you to see I have my piles neatly stacked over here. I have my rows laying across the top of the couch. I'm liking what I have, and we're going to go ahead and do our third row. Okay, so starting on the next row, according to our pattern, we have a red focal star and a green pinwheel. So we're going to go ahead and pick these up and sew these together, making sure our seams are laying properly. And again, if you pull or tug on these, sometimes the seams will want to lay the wrong way. So do pay attention to that. Holding my thread as I start so I don't pull it off of the needle. And we're going to go ahead and hold a couple of seams as I get going. And again, sewing is easy. You just got to keep track of your seams. Make sure they're laying straight. Keep track of your edges. And again, using pens eliminates a million ilks. Now, our next two is going to be a solid and a red pinwheel. So we're laying the solid over, making sure that we have our seams up, our flat one down, face to face. And we don't need to hold our threads when we start because we already have our anchor piece that we have here. Making sure we're right on that edge. Our seams are laying proper as we get to them. And we're going down. Okay, so we have next in line is our green focal block and our green pinwheel. So we're going to have two
green stars not far apart, but that's how the pattern calls it. And so again, we have a green focal and a green star. So we have our green focal and then our green star, laying it over, holding the sides that get sewn together, lining up our edges, making sure they're laying according to being ironed there. And starting our row. And of course, ideally, you always want your seams, one to be up, one to be down, to be perfectly locked together. But when you're doing a project like this and you have 4 seams on each side, sometimes it's not as easy as it sounds. Okay, so we're taking our first 2 pieces, trimming them apart, opening them up, and then we're going to lay them where they belong. So again, we are on the 3rd row. So we have this one and then these 2. So we're laying these together, lining them up perfectly. I'm going to put my seams on the top. So I can watch the seams go properly down the row, as they should. Down, ironed up. And I can pull these off, put on the next 2. And then in our guide, always checking, we have the red pinwheel, and then we're going to have our green and our pinwheel. So we're going to now have 2 seams together. So the shorter piece goes on top. We're lining our seams up. And now again, we're starting from the get-go, so we're going to hold on to our threads so they don't come off, unthread themselves, needle and thread themselves. And we go right down our block. Okay, so we have ended our row with the green pinwheel star. So now we need a solid, and then a red block and a green block. Okay, solid, red block, green block. We have a solid, red block, green block. And I think we just did this one. So we're going to use a cactus. Okay. And when you're doing a whole quilt, especially king size, and you're using lots of different kind of blocks, it's important to follow your pattern to make sure everything lines up correctly, because if you have a pattern, you want to make sure you keep that pattern.
So just double checking a green and then a solid. So we have our solid coming in here. And then after our solid, we have a red pinwheel and a red block. See what I did? Red pinwheel and a red block. So pardon my reach as we get ourselves a red pinwheel and a red block. So the last two in this row is the red pinwheel and the red block. Again, when you're perfectly ironed down, it works so much better. Looks like some of these pieces I didn't use steam on. When you're doing a lot of seams, highly recommend the steam setting, and that way you're really locking in those the steams, the flatness, the pressing. Because if you have a lot of seams to go over, it's very, very, very nice to have them laying as flat and as perfect as possible. All right, let's lay on our solid with our block. Because the solid is only one piece and we're putting it onto a very long line, our seams are down, our top piece, even though it's face down, our top piece is the flat solid. So we want to flip that up, make sure all of our seams go the way they're ironed, and we're keeping that perfect 1/4 inch as we go. Now we can put our last 2 blocks of this row, and then I think we'll go take our pieces, our rows, and lay them out on the king size bed so that we can see all of our pieces. We'll move everything into the bedroom and then walk to the other room and bring the pieces out. This is the stage where if you put pins in them all, it just goes so much quicker because they're all laid out and placed already. Okay, now this works out perfectly because the shorter piece has the seams. Seams are up, pieces are face to face, and I can watch my pieces as they go across, holding my threads as I start, back stitching, locking in that stitch, holding everything. We're right on the edge and sewing. And voila, I have 3 rows done out of 3, 6, 9 out of 9. Okay, we're 1/3 of the way done with our quilt top, not including the borders, which you know we already have the borders done. We just need to sew them on. And we'll go ahead and trim some of these threads, repress it, lay them out on the king size bed, and move on.
Okay, so we have our rows done. We're putting all of our rows down together and we're sewing them. So it's good to always put a safety pin in the row. That way you know which row is which. And if a safety pin you don't have, just use a needle with a little sticky note or a piece of scrap paper and stick it on the row. That way you know which row is which. And your quilt pieces will come together, and I'm feeling accomplished. I hope you're enjoying this. I'm going to show you momentarily when I get all these strips together, and we'll do the borders in another video just to be respectful of your time. But I have had so much fun with this quilt. I hope you have too, and we have at least one more video of me putting the borders on, and then we'll do a separate video a month or two from now when we get it on the long arm and in the line and quilted. I am very much loving this. This is looking great. Happy day. Okay, my friends, and when we are quilting and we have a very large, heavy piece going together with a very heavy, large piece, we want to make sure that it is rolled up or put up on the table so it's not pulling and torquing at the needle while we sew. Okay, and now I have 5 rows and I have 4 rows, so we're going to lay over my 5 rows directly to my 4 rows on the bottom and sew them together. And that's going to be bulky, so we want to wind that up in our lap and have it perfectly lined up. That way it's not pulling and torquing or anything else. So when you're at home sewing this part, you may want to have another chair, another table by you, or take this to the dining room table so you have a large table, because again, you don't want any pulling or torquing aggravating your 1/4 inch seam when you put these rows together either. And sometimes you've got to pull the bottom fabric to line it up as you go as well. Make sure you're all on that edge. Pull up the weight on the other side. Tuck it up underneath itself so it's not torquing or pulling too much. Making sure your seams are matching and laying straight. And then we're going to have to bring it back to the ironing board and carefully press it again to make sure all of our seams are laying properly. And that seam's supposed to come this way. And we are so almost done. It is torquing a little here, so we want to keep pulling this part up. There we go. That's what I needed to do already. Perfectly lined up at the end. Okay, last two blocks. The corners lined up perfectly. Let's make sure our seams are perfect. 2 up, 1 down. Now it just fell off the other end. All right, so let's pull that back up on the table. And it's bound to do that. We've got another 4 inches, and we want that perfectly straight on, not being torqued. And that seam is flipped. There we go. And I'm just going to, for success, at the end, and we are done. Beautiful. Let's pull that foot up, bring our needle up, pull it out, trim it off, call it done. All right, my friends, next step, over to the ironing board. We need a good press. But I have 9 blocks across by 9 blocks tall. A couple are hanging over the top, so you can't see them. But I am very excited. Let's go ahead and bring it over to the ironing board, and we will have another video coming up with it being pressed and the borders going on. Have a great day, my friends. I really appreciate you hanging out with me today and enjoying me as I journey through making this beautiful red, white, and green quilt with some of the focal blocks and things I love about Mexico. Have a great day.